Hello, everyone, and welcome to Coming in Hot. My name is Abby Baird. I am so fortunate enough to be your host today. Coming in Hot is all about the next generation of supply chain, how you can get involved in supply chain, what the supply chain industry has to offer. And today, we are going to be talking about all of that. We're going to be talking about the limitless opportunity within the supply chain, myths within the supply chain, and then just what there is, what opportunities there are, and how you can pursue it. So as the audience comes in today, make sure you comment where you're from. Feel free to throw in any questions you have, but I am so excited to talk about it. There's, like I said earlier, there are just limitless opportunities within the supply chain. And so 30 minutes is simply not enough to talk about them. So I am so excited to bring on my guest. So welcome Adebayo to the stage. And Adebayo, hello. How are you?
I'm well, Abby. I'm well. How's everyone doing? Awesome to be here. I'm so pumped up. As you can see, I'm just finishing my classes. I just finished. I lecture for about 3 straight hours. Normally by now I should be like, but I'm so full of energy for some strange reason. So
it's because you're here. You're coming in hot. That's why you're full of energy.
You got it.
I was like, let's have our audience. Hi, Reagan. Hi, Sarah. I'm so glad y'all are here. And just to learn about the opportunities within supply chain. Before we go into that, Adebayo, tell everyone who you are, what you're about, how you got into supply chain. Introduce yourself to the audience.
So my name is Adebayo Adeleke. I'm a supply chain junkie. I think that's what I like to call myself now. I've been doing this thing for close to 25 years now. I'm currently sitting at Sam Houston State University in Huntsville, Texas, where I am an adjunct professor of supply chain management. So I started my journey as an automated logistical specialist in the United States Army in 1998. And that was when I started as a supply clerk, as a supply clerk and warehouse, driving forklift, repair parts. I started from the lows of the lows, what at the beginning of supply chain, the entry level, progressed my way into warehousing and whatnot. And I became an officer in the United States military and started from the whole spectrum of supply chain management to procurement, material manager, all the way to I became a contracting officer, which is the contracting aspect of procurement. So until being a strategic, advisor to the ambassador of a country on supply chain and contracting, and till I retire, the lighting here is going down, but till I retire after 20 years of military service, and then I started my own consulting firm in supply chain management where I focus on supply chain risk management. So yes, that's my journey. It's been 25 years, but it's a lot. It's an action-packed career.
As it should be.
Yes. So I'm glad to be here, and I'm welcome everyone. We're gonna have some fun times. 30 minutes is not even enough.
Oh, never enough time to talk about supply chain, especially when you're passionate like we are. So
yes,
I was like, to go back to the audience, for those of you who weren't here in the beginning and you're joining, make sure you comment any questions you have or where you're from. I'm really excited for the audience to be able to learn from the insight you have, and we want to hear from y'all. So like you said earlier, 30 minutes is just simply not enough time to talk about everything within our supply chain. But it sounds like you just have a really broad experience within the supply chain and almost a unique pathway, especially for a lot of people my age and this next generation. I think it's becoming more intentionally pursuing supply chain rather than falling into it, while the current generation, I feel like, has just kind of fallen into supply chain. But the reason I'm so thankful you're on the show is because you learned about supply chain in a different function rather than corporate America. And so what are some unique ways that people can get involved in the supply chain industry, and what do those opportunities look like?
So for some of us that live in North America, and I'll use United States as a prime example, about 50 million people out of 350 million or so like that we have in the population of the United States is involved in some kind of supply chain activity on a day-to-day basis. It's huge. And I came in a very indirect route. It's like a curveball. I came in from the curveball side. I don't know if that's that curveball move. Anyway, I came from the military, and if historically speaking, next gen might not really care about history, but the what we call supply chain of today actually came from the military. If you go back in history to the French Revolution, and even way before then, how you marshal, how you move a military, is all logistics. The what we call logistics today actually and supply chain actually started. History of supply chain is always started from feeding armies in the military or so like that. So yes, so that's how I came in. And so when I retire and I joined that, there's so many opportunities there. And there's the thing about supply chain, because it's such a vast, industry, and it touches every human endeavor, regardless whatever you're doing. If you're a teacher, if you are an art, enthusiast, and whatever endeavor you have, and there is a place for you in supply chain. There's a supply chain that supports everything. There's a supply chain that supports modeling, all these fashion shows. There's supply chain that supports all kind of stuff. I won't even mention some of this supply chain stuff that I've studied of today, something I got aware of, some industries that actually, as long as movement of goods or services are involved, as long as somebody is being served a good or service, supply chain is involved, either way you like it or not. There's a supply chain that supports churches and faith-based organization. There's supply chain that supports marine, biology and all kinds of stuff. So I mean, in every endeavor of life, there is supply chain, and we've done, and I think our generation have not done enough work to actually invite the next gen to see how sexy supply chain is, how awesome, how fun supply chain is. Honestly, it is. It is
awesome.
Is the pulse of life. Supply chain is pulse of life. Supply chain is life.
Trust me, you are in good company. I agree. Stacy's from Zambia, so that's really cool. Hi, Stacy. We're really glad you're here. But I agree with you is that the world revolves around supply chain. And so I think it's been really exciting to watch the transition of supply chain, because even now, as someone who's really young in their career, a lot of the times when I tell people that I'm studying supply chain or that I'm an intern, they automatically go to like a transportation function or like, so you do transportation. And you are right. Stacy is correct. But they just automatically assume that I'm in some type of transportation function, and transportation is wonderful. It's a crucial part of our supply chain, but there's so many other aspects, so many moving parts. And one thing that you said that I really loved is that there's a supply chain for everyone, that you get to bring your passions and your strengths, and there's a supply chain that supports that. I also think, to your point about you being in the military and how that, traditionally speaking, that's a lot of where supply chain concepts come from. As a student who is actively learning about supply chain, which a lot of universities still don't even have supply chain programs, and I'm sure Reagan in the audience can relate to this too, because she's a student of supply chain, is that...
Hi, Reagan.
Yeah, Reagan's awesome. Is that we learn about how supply chain is a military function, and about how those are like main principles that we have taken from there, and we apply it to our current day. And so I think it's just so wonderful to see everything in supply chain interacting, and we get to learn from different functions and apply it to different places as well. What do you think? Because I said the supply chain is really transforming right now. It's really evolving. And so what are some false assumptions about supply chain that you think people think of? I know one I already said was that people just automatically go to transportation rather than all the other functions as well. So what are some false assumptions about supply chain management, and how could that limit particularly the next generation of entering the industry?
I think I'm glad you mentioned that, Abby. I think one of the false assumptions is supply chain management is part of business administration or so like that. It's a completely different part. Yes, it's all part of business administration as a whole, but the fact of the matter is an integral function of every business. It's not only business, trade and economy. Actually, supply chain is the backbone and the so-called the framework of every economy. I mean, every economy is based on trade, movement of goods and services across different international borders, right, or state borders. So if you cannot, at any given time, there's no supply chain to run it, then what you have no trade. Another false assumption is the fact that, I mean, you mentioned transportation as part of it, and the fact that the false assumption is not important. We've dealt with this particular false assumption that supply chain is not important, is never at the forefront. But I'm writing an article. It's called The Years of the Supply Chain. This is the year of the supply chain, starting from 2020. This is the decade of supply chain, because a lot of things is coming to fore. You're talking about now president of countries around the world, everyone, even the new babies they birth, the new baby that's given birth knows about supply chain these days, because almost everything that you cannot find, just blame it on global supply chain. It is very interesting that this is the year of supply chain. This is the decade supply chain is coming to fore. You know how long supply chain has been in existence? It has been in existence since the existence of man. But now, God knows, thousands of years later, we are now figuring out that this is so crucial to our existence. This is so crucial to our economy. This is so crucial. Look at what's going on in the world. I mean, everything is supply chain based now. Almost everything that you can find. Housing industry is down. There's no, because of supply chain. Food industry, a lot of retailers. I mean, AJ was sharing some experience when we were back room. I mean, it's crazy, So the false assumption that supply chain is not important and every other function in business is more important than supply chain is totally false.
I mean, I definitely agree, and I think, to your point, everything revolves around the supply chain. And if you spend any time with me at all, everyone around me is annoyed and gets annoyed by me, because every conversation we have, I'm like, well, that's a supply chain issue. That's a supply chain issue, because everything is. And so you made a really great point about all the things in the world right now are because of supply chain. And as I'm sure our audience knows, and I'd love for the audience to kind of contribute some disruptions they've seen, but we're experiencing a lot of supply chain disruptions right now. And so in turn, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. But Sarah also asked a really great question about what are the biggest questions your students have about supply chain right now. So I kind of want to combine those two, and like, what these disruptions, what are your thoughts about it, and what questions do your students have about them?
I think my students' question based around the fact that, what is this supply chain that they talk about? And why is it some of these things that people are having? I think the basic premise is, why is it all these problems that people are now isolating and people are speaking of? Why is it not glaring to everyone that if these are supply chain issues? In essence, they're saying that why is it not? Why our supply chain is getting shafted, why our supply chain been shafted over the years, because it's obviously, and boils down to what I said earlier, we've never really taken care of supply chain as a core function within our business models. The classic business model that we all run in different parts of the world till now doesn't have supply chain as the fore, and that is why we keep having supply chain issues. It's all based, I mean, nothing to take away from other functions like accounting and finance and HR and all these other functions, but supply chain is a huge and almost integral function of every business function. So, and I was trying to break down to them that it's taking time, because almost everybody does want some kind of supply chain in their life every day. You can't just relate. So it's something we do on a day-to-day basis, maybe not on the large scale, but on the small scale. I mean, get food from grocery. I mean, if you look at it, it's a supply chain. Every family has their own supply chain kind of system they run. So it's so part of our supply chain is so part of our life that we really can't see it as an important function, but actually it is.
I mean, I agree. I think just it's exciting to be in a supply chain space, because once you start studying it and once you start investing in it, you see it. You see the world around you and you understand how crucial it is. And to your point, a lot of companies still don't view supply chain as this crucial part of the business. And in reality, although granted, I do have supply chain goggles on, so I kind of see the world in a supply chain realm, but we can't do anything without a functioning supply chain. And I think alignment is a really crucial part of this, is that you can have a supply chain, and we're experiencing this now. It's like, it's almost like companies didn't realize how crucial the supply chain was until, I don't want to say broken, until we started experiencing these disruptions, is that without that alignment, we're not going to be able to deliver any of these other functions that are just as crucial for the business.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and then also it's there's just so much to get to, but it's also that this function, it's almost the assumption that it needs to work, and it becomes news when it doesn't. And so I
Mhm.
think that speaks to kind of the inefficiency. And I would love to know, actually, it's kind of a different pivot, is that we talked about all the endless possibilities within supply chain. We understand that now it's a crucial part of the business and how it's transforming. It's still transforming. It's evolving right now. What are some roles for college students to apply for in supply chain? How can students like myself get involved in supply chain, whether that's directly or indirectly? And then I also think after you answer that, Demba has a question, and so I'm excited to hear what they have to say. But what are some roles for students? How can they get involved in this, whether directly or indirectly? What's your advice?
Just get involved. That's the first step. I know you're interning, but internship is a big way to get involved in supply chain. And oftentimes, different industry have their different supply chain path. Oftentimes, what do you see in company A might be different from company B.
Mhm.
And there's only one way to get a taste of it is by testing it out.
Yeah.
So opportunities, I mean, there are a lot of opportunities that are coming this way. I mean, to really get understanding of a supply chain like I did, I started from the bottom, but for once you start from the bottom, you'll be able to connect the dots. So there's internship in shipping. It's a great way, especially people in college, young folks in college, shipping, delivering of goods and services, helping the last mile logistics, especially you guys don't want to do so much work because you still have some credit loads that you still have to deal with. So things like that will give you an opportunity to have a good oversight of what supply chain is. And also, you guys are so awesome in technology. You guys are part of
Yeah.
the age, so there's so much work as per understanding how the supply chain uses. There's a lot of internship work in programming languages. A lot of folks are into programming. A lot of using those tech skills. Social media in supply chain is something that most people haven't thought of in years. Content writing for supply chain. These are low hanging fruit for a lot of college students they can actually get into. The more you write content about supply chain, the more you study about it. You can't really put content out unless you study about it. So once you start studying about it, like, wow, I can put it on there in social media aspect, start to be getting creative about how you understand supply chain and putting it out there. And it makes a world of difference. Now, but you putting your understanding of supply chain out there on social media, you're also educating others as well in the process. So it's like a force multiplier when it comes to supply chain systems. So I think those are low hanging fruit for students. I mean, they really want to learn about supply chain is by just like riding a bike. You learn how to ride a bike. That at some point you have to get on the bike and just ride it. You really want to learn. You can watch YouTube all day long about how to ride a bike, but at some point you just have to get on it and ride. So the best part, apart from working in all these last mile, which can be very conducive for your schedule for college schedule, but also social media, content writing, all those kind of work, they will give you an insight and a very deep dive into what supply chain is and what is. And I've seen it help several students in that way, and a lot of them actually have come up with some very creative idea on how to push the front of supply chain.
Yeah, well, I mean, I feel like you can also see that with my role. Let's Talk Supply Chain. We took supply chain to TikTok, and I remember we were on like a clubhouse one time, and it was like, "What did you learn about supply chain?" And I was like, "I learned that you can be so creative in here in
Yes,
this space within supply chain." And additionally, also, if you don't follow our TikTok, feel free to at Let's Talk Supply Chain on TikTok. But also that it shows that there's not one way to enter the supply chain space, and
absolutely.
I mean, this circles back to your point in the beginning that you get to use your passions, you get to use your own interests, and getting in there and just working. I know I've experienced that already in my short career. It's just being a part of it and being a sponge of knowledge has definitely been transformative and really poured into my love of supply chain, but also just my ability to understand it and know what's happening. And then another great point you talked about, and this goes into Demba's question, is that you said knowing that technology piece is really important. So Demba, who's actually from France, which is I love that we have a global audience. Wants to know what's a better ERP for supply chain processes?
There are too many out there. Some of them are encompassing, some of them are not. Depending on the flavor which rides your company, you get to choose one. Actually, it's not even your decision as a supply chain. It's always pushed down from the strategic point of what people are trying to do, what the organization is trying to do as a whole. So it's but if you have the opportunity to be part of it, you just have to look at which one actually encompassing what the organization is trying to do from the beginning to the end. So you have the SAP, you have the Oracle, you have the JD Edwards. I mean, there's so many people. And people are even having independent ERP system. It's quite expensive to actually implement. But for the most part, you have to look at what actually ties in with your strategic view, because you cannot do anything outside your strategic output of the organization. They are the one that actually kind of dictate the tune. So it's quite interesting to see how that one works. But obviously, yeah, there's so many people out there. I mean, everyone is like an ice cream, several flavors, man. Too many flavors out there. You know.
Yeah, I feel like that's almost like the theme of what we're talking about today, is that the opportunities within every single aspect of supply chain, no matter what perspective you look at, is almost limitless. There's just so many options. There's so many opportunities. And so you get to be able to really dive in with knowledge and just understand what works best for you, what works best for your company, because there are just like we keep saying, 30 minutes is not enough to talk about our love for supply chain, especially when you have two supply chain nerds together. But I'd love to know, actually, because I just said that we both love supply chain, what is your favorite part of the supply chain, and what do you think makes it so unique?
Is interaction with people, getting to know people. People are the centerpiece of supply chain. I know we are moving into autonomous area, the use of artificial intelligence and machine learning, but it's very important to understand that people, they are the centerpiece of supply chain. Getting to interact with people, getting to network, getting to know people, what they are doing is fascinating. What people are doing out there is very fascinating and intriguing. You know, like I said earlier, if supply chain runs the world, and every aspect of our life is run by supply chain. So regardless whatever you do in your world, you have a space in supply chain. If you're an educator, you can actually have educational supply chain. You be like, you know what, I'm done teaching, I'm tired of teaching. You can actually flip into the supply chain world. And who is better to support the educational supply chain, if not because of educators that knows how, they know the pain points that happens within the, getting the necessary material and services to students. So my greatest pleasure in having been in this industry for over 25 years is the ability to meet people just like yourself, just like Sarah, just like everyone I've met along the way, AJ and all those guys. And I mean, so many people. It's just the fascinating, and it makes the whole thing colorful, very mosaic in nature. It may getting to meet people, getting to understand what people are doing in their own supply chain. Supply chain is very vast. So what you're doing, I might not have come across it before, but I'm so fascinated to learn about it. The same process goes on globally, or at least for the most part. This supply chain is almost the same thing everywhere, but the uniqueness of it for each sector is such a powerful thing, and you can only get to know this thing through people.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that's honestly a common theme among people in supply chain, is that the community is unmatched. And so if you're watching this and you're just wondering the possibility within the supply chain, if it's the space for you, it definitely is. I think the community that supply chain offers is unmatched. I think it's a function with a heartbeat behind it, because we have people like you who are there, who love it, and we're being a part of this change. And so it's just really the best time to be in supply chain. And like I said, the world revolves around it. Everything is supply chain in some capacity. So for students who are just now studying supply chain, obviously there's so many resources. There's LinkedIn, there's just Google, there's information at their universities. There's so much supply chain content out there. But what are ways that students can kind of shift their perspective to where they are seeing the supply chain moving around them?
Apart from shift their perspective, I know the next gen don't like to read. I have a lot of them in my class. You ask them what is going on in the world today, they barely can tell you what's going on in the news. They always get their news from TikTok and IG. That's fine. I'm not blaming them. I don't want to watch the news either. But we have to be informed about what is going on around us. We have to be informed. And that's one of two great advice I'll tell people: you have to be informed about what is going on around you. There's no way you can understand what goes on in supply chain without knowing what goes on around you. Almost everything. And you know what? We can have this conversation. This beyond the scope of this particular podcast, where I can tell you everything, any problem that goes on around global sales. If you look deep down, if you dig deep, you find out it's supply chain related. I'm telling you, with this, I can. Every time I do this game, I always win. I'm telling you, it's supply chain related. Supply chain related. And for younger next gen, younger generation coming behind, I can't even believe I'm saying that because I'm still young myself. Find a mentor. Find a mentor. Oftentimes, supply chain is an industry whereby it is everlasting. You continue to learn until you die. Is ever evolving, ever evolving. Like, what I've learned about supply chain in 20 years is completely obsolete. It's completely obsolete. If you're operating in this current era, it's completely obsolete. So find a mentor, because the wealth of knowledge, though, might be obsolete, but there's something about it that is, this cold heart that always still be relevant. The heart of Picasso, years ago, is still, regardless you put it in this era, it's still something special. So find a mentor to always help you put things in perspective. And for you to gain somebody, find a mentor. I'm telling you that it is one of the most important steps I took in my life, and people around me as well. They've always found a mentor to help them out in the whole process of it, to help you put things in perspective.
Yeah. And I'm sure our viewers who are kind of entering the supply chain space now, whether they're a student, have been in the industry for a while, really appreciate that advice, because I know the people in my life who have, like, the mentors in my life who have poured into me and really invested time into me, have, one, changed my life, but also changed my perspective of supply chain. And I think that's a reason why I am so passionate about the supply chain, is because the people around me have just poured in that passion. And so I'm sure the audience definitely appreciates that advice, because I know I do. But for those who normally do not tune into Coming in Hot, welcome. But now we enter the last segment of our show. For those of you who do not know, Let's Talk Supply Chain has a TikTok account, and we bring supply chain content to TikTok. And so make sure you follow it. But we want to highlight some TikToks. And so this one just kind of talks about all the different functions, the endless opportunity, and hopefully kind of highlights some different functions of the supply chain that we normally don't even view as of supply chain. So hopefully this TikTok kind of allows you to walk around the world and be like, oh my goodness, that person is stocking a shelf. They are doing their role in the supply chain. That's a last mile truck. And so that's the purpose of this TikTok. And then we also have a second TikTok, which kind of talks about why this person got a master's degree in supply chain, and how she's bringing her own passions of sustainability into her studies, and how her passion for sustainability really drives her desire to transform the supply chain. And I chose to and it's also activism. Megan Masheri, she's really cool. So check out her TikTok, and definitely follow Let's Talk Supply Chain on TikTok. But I wanted to include this one because, and it goes directly to what we talked about today, is that bring your thing into supply chain. The supply chain has so much room to grow. It's transforming already, but it's going to continue to evolve. And so the supply chain needs passionate people who are passionate about supply chain. I mean, obviously supply chain, I mean sustainability, or the ethics within supply chain, or just no matter what it is, bring that and be a part of the change. Because especially right now, you spoke about all the disruptions going on earlier. With all these disruptions in the supply chain right now, now's the time where change is happening. So to bring in your passion, to bring our passions into here, I just think it's truly the single best time to be in supply chain. But also, thank you so much to our sponsors, to Ships, and to Let's Talk Supply Chain. And thank you to our audience for joining and being so engaged today. Please continue to ask questions and to engage. And please connect with me and Adebayo on LinkedIn. We're excited to get to know y'all more and answer any more of your questions. But most importantly, Adebayo, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Abby. Thank you, Let's Talk Supply Chain. And just like everyone else, come as you are. Come to supply chain. We need more people.
We